So I spent a couple days reading and evaluating many studies, and at the end of the day, the NTSB has some really good recommendations that really follow with what I believe in. So we're going to go over 8 of them. Number 1, they talk about vehicle hazard detection. So they say many high-risk traffic situations between motorcycles and other motor vehicles could be prevented if vehicle drivers were better able to detect and anticipate the presence of a motorcycle when entering or crossing a road, making a turn, or changing lanes. Now, this is talking about other vehicles seeing us. So we're taught in MSF and whatever place you got your training at to present yourself better, to make it so that you're seen. And when it comes to vehicle hazard detection, they just don't see us. Our profile is super small. We have one headlight, so if we're like right positioned with another vehicle, we blend in with that vehicle. We pretty much take over with their field of view. Like our headlight will be the person's left headlight behind us, so it really looks like it's just a car. So we start having these issues. So that's where moving around and presenting yourself, kind of like moving around your lane a little bit, coming up to an intersection, or when a car is wanting to pull out in front of us, just kind of move around, but still be prepared for that swerve or braking, will really grab their attention. Another thing that grabs people's attention when it comes to that moving around, it's the headlight that's grabbing their attention. So the thing that grabs their attention is the light. So having a modulating headlight, if you're allowed to in your state, would drastically improve the motorcycle detection when it comes to the other vehicle. Okay, so if you can, based off of their recommendation, is that many high-risk traffic situations between vehicles could be prevented if the other vehicle could see us. And that's where a lot of the anecdotal information that we're getting is like, well, drivers don't see us. Well, what we can do is have that modulating headlight or present ourselves even better by giving ourselves more time and more room. So slowing down before the intersection and moving around a little bit. So if we can't have that modulating headlight, which goes on, off, on, off, on, off, it's basically high beam, low beam, high beam, low beam. If we can't get that in our state, or wherever it is that you are with your municipality, move around left and right just a little bit. I'm not talking from lane position 1 to 3, but just a little bit, even within just lane position 2 or something. And that's just going to make it move a little bit, okay? So that's something that I kind of got from that recommendation. The next recommendation, which is number 2, is going to be improve your hazard detection time. Now, this is based off of the motorcyclist. So motorcycle riders' collision avoidance performance could be improved by extending the range of hazard detection and providing riders with more information, enhanced awareness, and more time to react to crash risks. Now, that all goes towards hazard perception and then situational awareness. I have on the Dana and the Fireman channel, if you're watching this on After the Ride or listening to this on iTunes or Spotify, I do have situational awareness training. I talk about the OODA loop. I talk about the code system, white, yellow, orange, red, and black. I'm really trying to bring apart these situational awareness concepts that were established in the gun community, in military, in firefighting, police officers, all these different things, because they have to have it because at all times there's a threat 24/7 with, military. So they live it. Motorcyclists, we only live it when we're on a bike, and even then we're not practicing it. So my goal is to promote situational awareness and hazard perception, because if you don't see the hazard until it's right on you, it's too late. And that's what it's talking about here, is that we need to improve our hazard detection time. So the easiest thing that you probably heard of is the total stopping distance of motorcycle braking. And it could be total stopping distance for cars and whatever. You have your perception time. So the moment you perceive that hazard is the moment the total stopping distance is established. It starts, okay? So if you don't see it at all, there's no stopping, right? So the moment you see it is the moment it starts. So it can be judged by time or judged by distance. So the perception time is usually the moment you see a hazard, and then the moment you react is about a second, okay? And the moment you react is your reaction time. So you have perception, then reaction time. And then you have stopping distance. So how far it takes you to actually stop your motorcycle. So you have perception time, so you see the hazard, you react, so now you're reaching for those brakes, and then now you're applying the brakes, and then now you're waiting for how long it takes to stop. And that all equals together. The whole equation is total stopping distance. Well, if you don't perceive it in time, or if you don't perceive it until super late, it doesn't matter how good you are at braking. It doesn't matter how fast you are at reaching for those brakes. It really is, we need to see these hazards well ahead of time. And that's where situational awareness, and that's where profiling, and that's where, the OODA loop comes into play. You got to profile intersections. Every intersection is a complete danger. Every curve is a complete danger. And that is where we need to be shortening our hazard detection time. And that involves training, that involves, getting taught how to do it. And then on top of that, the rider themselves having to practice and be competent in it. So that is really big. And they're talking about how we can improve our detection time by doing that. Okay. Or, improve our collision avoidance by improving our hazard detection time. Sorry, it's really cold out. I'm like shivering back here. So number 3, electronic vehicle to motorcycle detection. Now, this is part of the vehicle to vehicle. We're starting to go into vehicle to vehicle detection. So not human to human. So the human in the vehicle and then the human on the motorcycle. We're talking about the actual vehicle itself, like the four-wheel drive, or not four-wheel drive, the four-wheeled vehicle and the motorcycle talking to each other. This is new technology. This is things that are coming out and almost becoming standard in a lot of four-wheeled vehicles. So vehicle-based crash warning and prevention systems will be most effective at preventing collisions when they can reliably detect all vehicle types, including motorcycles. So when we start having, like the Tesla and all these autonomous vehicles, they're not actively searching for motorcycles or pedestrians. We recently, I don't even know if it's recent anymore, but in Phoenix we had, I think it was Uber testing out their autonomous vehicles, and it just straight up plowed into a pedestrian at night. And that's just because their systems do not detect pedestrians. Their systems detect other vehicles. And what the NTSB is saying is that we need to have these systems detecting motorcyclists. So the whole we're going to go into number 4, which talks a little bit more about that, but it needs to detect all types at the end of the day. Okay, so let's just go to number 4. It says add motorcycles to vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure detection. So the integration of motorcycles with connected vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure systems has been limited compared to other vehicle types. So what it means, we kind of talked about vehicle to vehicle. But to jump a little bit more into that, so if like you see like even on a Toyota Tacoma or like a really nice car or something, you'll have the leaving out of your lane indication on your dash, on your mirrors. So it tells you, hey, you're leaving your lane. Also, it tells you, hey, there's somebody in your blind spot on your mirrors to let you know, hey, there's somebody in your blind spot. Right now, that is not detecting motorcycles. And motorcycles themselves don't have that technology. So once you start leaving your lane, it's not letting us know on a motorcycle. I mean, it's kind of easy to see that when it comes to motorcycle, but it's not letting us. And it's also not, motorcycles are not being picked up on those car blind spot detection systems. So that's really big. It's also not being picked up on the braking assistance systems on cars. So to add the motorcycles into that system is going to hopefully, and during the report they say that it should. So I'm just basing off my own anecdotal information, is that hopefully it should lower some crashes, because with crashes you're going to have almost every crash is going to involve some type of injury. I think I saw in multiple studies it's around 11 to 12% ish, 10 to 12% ish of all crashes involve a fatality of the motorcyclist. So 1 out of 10 crashes, somebody's going to die. And if 1 out of those 10 involved a vehicle not detecting them, that's going to save some lives. So that's really important. And there's more electronic detection, more motorcycle electronic stuff that is kind of coming down the pipeline. So manufacturers are actively trying to do it. It's a completely different system than cars. And that's just one of the biggest things. Another thing is the active headlight. So in the middle of a turn, how some car headlights will look through the turn. Motorcycles don't have that, so we have limited visibility on curves, which is one of the 2 most dangerous areas for motorcyclists. There's also stuff where that's coming out. It's kind of coming down the pipeline where it will alert the motorcycle rider of a turn up ahead and a warning sign to slow down for that turn based off of GPS, based off of mapping. So I think that's kind of cool stuff that's coming up, and I think that's really important. And I think that's going to help some riders. So number 5 is going to be ABS. So anti-lock braking system technology would improve motorcycle safety by enhancing the effectiveness of rider evasive actions through improved braking performance and stability. So the NTSB recommends that ABS be standard on every single on-road motorcycle. And I've approached this subject before, and I'm going to tell you guys right now, I absolutely believe that ABS should become standard on all motorcycles that are developed for on-road. Now, the reason why I say developed for on-road is because off-road motorcycles or dual sport motorcycles don't want ABS. It's actually a hindrance to off-road performance and safety, to be quite honest. So I believe on-road, so sport bikes, cruisers, standard bikes, choppers, whatever it is, that are developed for only on-road, I believe they should have ABS standard. And it says in the recommendation that the effectiveness of rider evasive actions through improved braking and stability. I absolutely 100% believe that, because based off of all my after-action reviews that I've done on this channel, or on the Dan and the Fireman channel, a lot of it is panic braking and losing control and losing stability and losing traction because of locking up of the tire. Now, improving hazard detection time would help out with that, but we need to start thinking in terms of what can we improve with the human element and what can we improve with the technical or non-human element of that, I guess. So to improve the human element of the whole situation is, yes, let's improve our hazard detection time. But if there is a failure of our hazard detection time, hopefully something on the motorcycle will prevent the catastrophic failure of a crash, basically. So I always interpret it as, trapeze artists, you're out doing your fancy flips and stuff, but why not have a net just in case your skill fails? And that's a lot like with motorcycle gear. You could do absolutely everything perfect, but what happens if you just fail or something happened that was out of the ordinary and now you crash? Now what? Does it matter how much skill you have? No, now we're at the mercy of physics, and hopefully the gear that we purchased prior to this and properly worn and fitted would help prevent or mitigate some of the more severe incidences. So hazard detection time would prevent a lot of issues, but if we fail at that, because we're all human, we have all different things, we might be tired that day, I definitely want ABS or some type of traction control system, which we'll talk about, to hopefully save my butt and to remind me, hey, I should be paying attention. So I absolutely believe in terms of ABS being standard and how it will improve our stability and braking performance, because we won't be doing any panic braking. And if we do a panic brake, hopefully it's going to kick in and take care of us. So number 6 is traction stability control systems. So stability control systems on motorcycles could reduce single vehicle crashes that involve loss of control and running wide on a curve and off the road, which would reduce the prevalence of motorcyclists killed or injured by impacts with roadside fixed objects. So right here, it's saying single vehicle, help reduce single vehicle crashes. And with the ABS and with the hazard perception that we're talking about, when we've been talking about vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure technology, that is all for landmines, I like to call other vehicles on the road. So vehicle to vehicle crashes and collisions, all that stuff will help prevent that. But when it comes to traction stability control systems, it says single vehicle crashes. That's because a lot of fatalities happen on curves and people going too fast into the turn, then wanting to apply the brakes and they're basically applying trail braking inappropriately. They lose control of their system. They low side, they swing it back up and then crash off into a fixed object. If you low side in the middle of a turn, you're going to keep sliding until you stop. And typically on the public roads, you're going to stop when you hit a curb, or you're going to bounce off the curb after having a massive impact, or you're going to hit a guardrail and get wrapped around it and possibly get ripped in half. And that's quite possible. I've seen that. I've seen that with cars. Not very many motorcyclists in my time doing that, is mainly vehicle versus vehicle. But I've seen cars with crumple zones and everything just get wrapped around a pole, and that's easily something that can happen to a human. And they're not as strong, so they'll just get ripped in half. So I absolutely believe that traction and stability control systems should be standard on a safe basis, or should be an option that is relatively inexpensive. Now, I understand ABS and traction control systems are completely different. ABS is an electronic, but it's also mechanical, and it can only do so much. And then the cost of that is relatively inexpensive compared to traction stability control, because that you have gyroscopes, you have computer systems, extra computer systems, you have crazy new technology that's still coming out, so it's really expensive. It's almost like having the first flat panel HD TV, the 1080p when it first came out, a couple $1,000. Now you can find them for like $100, So I think we're at that level right now where it's starting to become more and more standard. I absolutely believe ABS should be standard, because you can get for the 2018 Honda Rebel 500, it was only $399, or I think $400, maybe $500 more to get ABS. I think that the price of the bike should be just increased to $500 more, or figure out what the real cost is and just implement that into the base cost, because ABS is a lifesaver for new riders, and based off a lot of the MCSS or MCCS, the motorcycle crash causation study, a lot of the riders that are dying are new riders. And we can go into more of, who's dying, who's crashing more versus who's not, and how certain systems can help those newer riders. But based on my research through all the NTSB, NHTSA, the FMV, SS for the Department of Transportation, all those different things, it's literally new riders or riders that just left a training facility, those which are new riders. So I think ABS would definitely help, and traction control stability systems would definitely reduce single vehicle accidents. Okay. So number 7, it talks about alcohol and impairment drugs, and part of the MCCS, there was no, they didn't grab any information for if any of them that crashed were taking drugs or alcohol. They weren't tested. So I'm going to grab some information from some motorcycles crashes. And this one is going to be persons killed in total and alcohol impaired crashes by person in 2017. Once again, I'll have the link in the description for you guys. So total killed motorcyclists in 2017 is 5,172. Okay, 1,704 of those were killed with alcohol in their system. So 33%. And that's pretty indicative of the total vehicle occupant deaths. So total vehicle occupant deaths. Actually, let's go back. So the driver occupant deaths. There's a total amount of drivers of a four-wheel vehicle was 18,726, and that's the total of deaths. Now, the ones that had alcohol is 6,158, which is 33%. So 33% for drivers, 33% for motorcyclists. So that is a human problem, and that is something you could just completely reduce. You have you can reduce, your fatality rate by a lot if you just don't drink and ride. So that is huge. And if we're thinking about that, and this isn't part of the NTSB's recommendations for the MCCS, if you think about it, 33% reduction of a chance of basically being the fatal crash is that 37% chance reduction of fatal crashes if you are in a crash. So if you're in a crash, you have a 37% chance of reducing the fatality of that crash by wearing a helmet. So if drinking and riding or drinking and driving is illegal, I personally believe a universal helmet law would help reduce a lot of fatalities also. So I think the reduction of fatalities is something that we should be considering, and I can talk more about helmet use a little bit later or in a different video. But let's move on to motorcycle licensing procedures, and this is their last recommendation. So motorcycle licensing procedures have not been adequately evaluated for safety and effectiveness. So which makes it difficult to determine if current licensing procedures are achieving reductions in motorcycle crashes, injuries, fatalities, or encouraging unlicensed riders to be fully licensed. So the licensing procedures, the things that they have control over is the DMV. Okay, so the Motorcycle Safety Foundation, Total Control, all those other places, there's no direct information from the government to find out if anything was reduced. All they can pretty much do is talk about what the DMV test is and the procedures that follow. So Arizona, I mean, every state has different stuff. So Arizona has its own thing where, you get your permit. You have to do 30. If you're underage, you have to get 30 hours of on motorcycle training after you got your permit. It's restricted by freeways. You can't ride at night. No passengers. Have to wear a helmet. The 30 hours is just a sign off of your parent or guardian. When you turn 16, you can take a test, a written test, and then a practical test, and boom, you got your full endorsement, full license. You can ride whatever the heck you want to ride at the age of 16. If you're over 18, you can pretty much do all that stuff without parent and guardian and all that. You just go in, take your stuff, do it, call it a day. So that's not good. That's not good enough. And I think a training facility that gives you 2 to 3 days of training is going to be better than the DMV's, do it on your own type style. At the end of the day, though, I truly believe we need more time at these training facilities before we can give somebody basically their license or a waiver to get their license. But right now there's not enough studies and there's not enough stuff going on. And I've made a podcast and I made a video on how we're not really doing much in terms of reducing motorcycle fatalities, and we really aren't. So I think we can use, as motorcycle coaches, we can use these 8 tips to really add in some recommendations of our own during class. So for me, I'm always going to recommend somebody buy a motorcycle with ABS. I'm always going to recommend somebody get what they can afford when it comes to traction and stability control systems, never to drink and ride. Make sure to continually train, because what you're getting here is not going to be enough to keep you alive. It's just going to give you the basics, fundamentals. It's up to you to refine those fundamentals. Vehicle hazard detection, where the vehicle does not see the motorcyclist, that should dictate kind of how I coach and what I say to them, saying, hey, you are invisible when it comes to riding on a motorcycle, so you must treat the other people like they cannot see you. And that means you need to try your best to get them to see you. So I think that's one of the biggest failures of the whole ride like you're invisible. I completely agree with riding like you're invisible, but let's make it to where we're not as invisible. Let's make us visible. That's the biggest thing. And I think the modulating headlight, presentation, line of sight, all those different things that I coach and teach, hopefully will reduce fatalities. Like I said, hopefully, because only anecdotally right now I can kind of see. Improving hazard detection time, that's our situational awareness. And I believe we should spend more time on that in motorcycle training courses. And I think the NTSB, the FMVSS, which is basically the Department of Transportation, I believe that should be a part of their training, their owner-operator manual and testing process. I think that should be part of the licensing thing, because I don't think it's enough. I really don't think it's enough. I think it's all about the skills, not enough about the mental aspect. And then the electronic vehicle detection and the vehicle to interface. Right now, there's not much we can do about that. That is more so a manufacturer recommendation, not necessarily a rider themselves or driver recommendation. But I would definitely use that in class and say, hey, you hear about all these vehicles having, blind spot detection. Realize that if you have that in your car, don't expect that that's going to trigger when a motorcyclist is in your blind spot. So you should still do your head check while you're driving your car. And then with that said, that if you are next to a car, don't assume that their hazard detection is going to see you. It's not. It's actually going to say that there's nothing there, and then they're going to trust that, and then they're going to go. So don't be in people's blind spots, basically, if I want to boil that down. At the end of the day, I would really like if these recommendations were adopted by the government and adopted by manufacturers and really pursued hard, or at least harder. But the reality is it's up to us. It's up to us as motorcycle riders, car drivers, to really focus on what is safe and what is recommended by people that are smarter than us, to be quite honest. Okay, we're out there doing what we do. We ride and we crash, we die, all these different things. And they're the ones collecting the data and saying, hey, this is why you guys are crashing and dying. And we should realize that. So every crash, every fatality that happens, let's learn from it. And that is what they're doing. So with that said, hope you guys ride safe, be safe, and I'll be seeing you around.